Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and you're welcome to today's session. We had such a lengthy and good session yesterday, if I dare say so myself. I believe that today will be even more impactful as we tend to bring all the information that we have discussed yesterday together. So because we do not want to take so much of our time, I believe many of us have other engagements. It will not be very wise to be waiting for people who would come in later. So we will start off immediately, and I believe others will join us, and I hope that they will be able to make sense of whatever they meet, or wherever they meet us, rather. So I would just do a quick recap of what we discussed yesterday, and then we'll build on it so that we'll begin to tie all the information together. So the essence of what we are doing is to raise an awareness of something that many of us have taken for granted or have overlooked. It's unfortunate in this part of the world, we tend to not prioritize what is important, but we have the issues or the things that we consider important and we continue to chase after them and neglect some, only to realize that those ones which we have neglected are equally as important as the ones we pursued. And then maybe we'll now realize very late in the day, and then it will become a Herculean task. Prevention, they say, is better than cure. And it is always easier to tackle situations when they are little than when it has become a monster. That is why I believe that what we are doing in this webinar, which is a health education, is very important. I just shared some facts or some posters on the platform, and I would just love to look at it again so that, sorry, somebody is asking me for the link to join the webinar. Let me quickly share that with the person so that they can join. All right, so I shared some information just a while back, and the information has to do with mental health and students. So it's something that we need to pay attention to. Let me just read a few of them quickly. So the question is, we have already discussed what mental health is, but the information I have here says mental health refers to much more than simply the absence of mental health disorders or illness. So when we talk about health, we're not necessarily talking about the absence of illness. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, to realize their abilities, to learn, to work well, and to contribute to their community. So all of these are what mental health talks about. And that is one of the things that we looked at yesterday. So this is just further research I did earlier today, and I just thought I should bring it to the fore before we go on. But the main points of what I shared have to do with why is mental health important for students? Remember, we are looking at mental health disorders amongst under 18s, people who are primarily in school. So amongst children and adolescents, that is my main focus. It is important for every level of the individual, both childhood, adolescent, young adult, or adults. However, we are looking at young adults. We are looking at children and adolescents simply because it is our duty as adults, as parents, as teachers, as community leaders to care for these ones. Now, for instance, let's take our eyes off mental health and look at physical health, for instance. We know that children, as they develop, are not, their immune system is not as developed as that of many adults. So what we do as adults is that we try to protect them from coming in contact with organisms that will harm their health. So we keep our environments clean, We try to remove every germs. We try to remove anything that will harm them, whether physically or otherwise, so that they will not come in contact with situations or with things that will, cause their health to deteriorate. So we go the extra mile. We even take some preventive medications to ensure that our children are healthy and stay healthy. So these things are no different when it comes to mental health. The way we prioritize prevention and care for the younger ones is the way we should do for those who are our children or the children we manage in when it comes to mental health. That is why we are discussing this. So as much as possible, the children are not able to regulate themselves as much as we can do as adults. Like we have seen, most of the statistics that we saw or that we have seen and will continue to see are not restricted only to children. When the World Health Organization, for instance, says that depression and anxiety is the topmost mental health disorders that people are facing, they are not talking only about children. There are some statistics that are primarily for adolescents. We are going to see some of them today. But when the World Health Organization speaks, it's covering all phases of the human life. So we are looking at this because as adults, we are able to manage our emotions. We are able to manage, because a lot that has to do with mental health is perception. It's about what you tell yourself. People come under stress, or like what one of the concepts we saw yesterday, mental breakdown. It is about the self-talk. What are the information that you process? How do you process information in your mind? Some of us as adults can do these things. Some of us have friends or people that we can speak with, and they will help us to go through these phases. But children are not like that. They don't have such strength, mental strength, to be able to cope with the stresses of life, to be able to cope with peer pressures. They don't have the ability to cope with the information that is the avalanche of information that is on the internet, for instance, on television, or in the society. They don't have the ability to process information when they see violent acts, either from parents, or maybe they are driving on the street and they see two adults, taking it on each other. Some of these things leave a scar in the minds of the children. They are not able to help themselves unsee what they have seen. So that is why it is important that as adults, we create the opportunity for children to be able to ventilate some of these things. That is one of the things I stressed yesterday a lot. We do not value the culture of sitting down with children and allowing them to ventilate what they are going through. We need to create that culture, and that is one of the primary ways by which we can prevent the growing state of mental health disorders amongst children. Children see a lot of things, sometimes knowingly and unknowingly. Sometimes they see these things because they are careless, or because the adults in the room are careless, and they don't do due diligence to ensure that the children are protected from our own misbehavior, let me put it that way. So we expose these children to a lot of things, either in schools. Imagine two children fighting, or maybe adults fighting in the presence of children, and then resorting to all forms of verbal abuse, going all the extreme. Some people resort to using weapons on each other. Some of these things leave a scar on children. And then some of the things we do directly to the children as a means of probably discipline, or maybe abuse in the extreme form. So all of these things are things that once it stays in the mind of the child, begins to affect them in the future. And the first phase of their life, which is the phase where they have to go through education, these things come to play. So the question is asked, why is mental health important for students? So mental health, a stronger mental health for students means that they can learn better and be more likely to realize their full potentials, or the full potentials of their ability. Students' mental health in school is a crucial part of the education system. Ultimately, students with positive mental health are able to more effectively build relationships, which is key. It is parents that recognize that students or children go to school to learn. As far as children are concerned, they go to school for social activity. So, which is also part of learning anyway, but the academics for learners or for children is secondary. The primary reason why they go to school is to socialize. So if a mental health condition impairs their ability to socialize. It will also ultimately affect their ability to learn, because the student or the learner has to first build a relationship with his or her teacher before they can receive learning from that teacher. Just as they socialize with their friends, they have to also socialize with teachers. So if a child already has a bias against adults, either a male or a female, for whatever reason, for something that he or she has experienced in life, imagine how that child will learn in school. So it impairs the ability to, to build relationship, make decisions, and work together. So these positive effects not only support the individual students, but also their larger community as they enter into adulthood. So we have established the fact that everything that an individual will become in life starts from the cradle, from the childhood. Sigmund Freud, a popular psychoanalyst, said everything we are going to become in life, we learn at the first 5 years of life. And some people say, I worked briefly in the Montessori environment. Maria Montessori believes that the individual brain is at its peak at between 3 and 5 years. That is when the brain of the child is at its peak. That's when they do a lot of learning. That's why a child can learn languages and all other things that we desire them to learn. So the reason why a child can learn culture, can learn language, can learn many things is because the brain at that level, especially at 3 years old, 2, 3 years old, and maybe up to 5, is at its peak. And then afterwards, it begins to decline gradually when we expose them to many other things. So at this level, we need to do a lot as adults to protect the children, because it is our duty, because we owe them that much. And then if we want a saner society, we want to live freely, we want to live peacefully, especially at our own older age, we then need to do a lot to prevent some of the vices that may likely occur if we allow our children to be exposed to so many mental health conditions at childhood. So yesterday we looked at some of these things, and I just want us to build on that. So again, to emphasize the point, we looked at this picture yesterday, and then we asked the question, which of them do we believe may be diagnosed with mental health condition? And I did emphasize the fact that a person may be looking grouchy and frown, and does not necessarily mean that he or she has or does not have a mental health condition, because sadness or being angry is not necessarily a mental health disorder. One can be angry at times with situations of life or with people's conduct. Somebody may have an indifferent disposition. It also doesn't mean that he or she is free from mental health disorder. On the other hand, as well, someone who is always smiling, who always have a positive disposition or positive expression, may not excuse him or her from mental health disorder. So it doesn't mean that he has or she has, or that she doesn't have. It is only when, like I emphasized yesterday, when we have seen a consistent pattern of on what we consider to be undesired behavior, that we will now be able to conclude that this person may be suffering from 1 or 2 or maybe any of the mental health disorders. We looked at mental health disorders, mental health, we talked about it. We looked at mental illness, what is it? And then we emphasized the fact that mental illness is any illness that originates from the mind. So earlier today, I was also reading some stuff about the brain, lunacy, insanity, madness, and then the history of how it developed and all the research work that have gone into it. And I did find some things. So some things that were previously lumped together as mental illness, over time, with further research and further development in sciences, were now being delisted. For instance, like I mentioned yesterday, cerebral palsy and autism. Some of these things were initially lumped together as mental illness, but with further research and development in knowledge, we now begin to delist some of those things and then begin to place them appropriately. So there are some things that are developmental challenges. For instance, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, some of those things are not necessarily mental illness. Yes, they may affect the brain, but they are biological in nature and not psychological. So a mental illness is something that is strictly psychological. And yes, there are some of them that can be, in the extreme cases, may require medication, and then like the psychotic disorders, while some others can be corrected by a simple talk therapy, which is psychotherapy, sitting with a trained mental health expert or a trained counselor. One can be able to, walk through some of these challenges and overcome them. So that is one of the things we need to prioritize. A talking through situation, we need to prioritize the importance of discussing with people. So as parents, as teachers, we need to also be observant. We need to look through and be able to see things. I know that the times are challenging. We are running around trying to make ends meet. We're trying to get money. Those things are important. But again, it is also equally important that we do not only just provide the physical needs of our children, we need to also provide for their psychological needs, their emotional needs. So the children does not only need food, clothing, and shelter, they also need emotional well-being, emotional satisfaction. And that they can only derive from a parent that is present, or from an adult, a significant adult in their life that is present with them. So it's not enough to just provide all the beautiful things of life, go leave the children at home with probably the nanny or whoever that is cold towards them, or just take a child and drop them at the daycare where the attendant has many other children to care for, and the children is deprived of basic emotional needs that they require to grow up into healthy human beings. And a child who has not learned to be loved may also not be able to give love. So these things have a replaying effect. It has a cycle. So if a child has not received love from the significant adults in his or her life, either because they are too busy or they have a lot to cater for, then that child will not learn love. Children learn from adults. Language is something that is picked up from the environment, the same way emotional needs are picked up. So a child that have been shown adequate love and attention will in turn be able to give the same. So if we do not take these things to heart and prioritize them, we may be breeding monsters. They may be intelligent, they may be brilliant in terms of academics, but in the area of emotions, hearts, the humanity in them, we may be losing a lot. And in the future, only God knows the kind of society we will have if we continue the way we are going. So we look at psychotic disorders, which are the severe aspects of mental health disorders. So mental health disorders has a spectrum. It is in a continuum. We have the very mild ones, and then we have these extreme ones. At the extreme is the ones we refer to as psychotic disorders. Psychosis, we talked about yesterday, is the symptoms of the severe types of mental health disorders. Behavioral disorders are those things that children do, and then we say that once it becomes a consistent pattern, we need to take them, look into it and find a way to help them. Mental breakdown, a lot of people go through this every day, and they need our attention and care. So it is a nervous breakdown or a state of helplessness that people come to, and they tend to just lash out, probably let out some steam. So for some people it may be one-off, for some people it may be a recurring situation. Once it becomes recurring, the person probably requires to sit down with a mental health. We talked about some statistics, we looked at the different types, and then we said that they are divided into two broad types: the psychosis, which is the more severe type, and then the neurosis, which are the behavioral type, those ones which the neurosis are things that a simple cognitive adjustment will be able to help, or behavioral adjustment will be able to help overcome. But with psychosis, there may be the need for one to have some medication associated with a talk therapy. And then we look at the 6 major types. I did mention yesterday that there are over 300 types of the mental health conditions, according to the statistical manual, the American Psychology Statistical Manual, that is charged with the responsibility of identifying and listing all the mental health conditions. Now, the experts have said that the most popular ones are anxiety and depression. But I want to encourage us to look at, to pay attention, especially in our society, to pay attention to personality disorders and eating disorders, alongside the anxiety disorders and the mood disorder. So we need to also pay attention to a lot of what we see in our environment today falls within the area of personality disorder. We discussed this at length yesterday. We talked about the borderline, we talked about the antisocial. So people who are, their personality interferes with the smooth running of society. Most of those things they fall within personality disorder. And we need to look at them. They are prevalent amongst children in schools, people who are bullies, people who just find it, okay to trouble other persons. So those things are things that we need to also pay attention to. So we need to start looking. The essence of this information is for us to be able to identify that what is already before us. So once you look at it and you identify it, so in a school setting, for instance, an administrator needs to have what we call an incident notebook or an anecdotal record book. So if a child begins to frequent in your book for some, behavior or behavioral maladjustment, then that child requires the attention of a psychotherapist, somebody who should sit with the child and find out where these issues are stemming from. So a child is always being reported for always bullying another. Every time you have a misbehavior, or even if it's in a group, the child is part of it. If it's an individual, he's there. Something is wrong somewhere. So if it becomes a consistent pattern, then we need to pay attention to that child and help them find out. So a lot of things caning will not solve. We can cane a child that has mental maladjustment from now till that kingdom come. It will not solve the problem. You don't use fear to kill a mental health situation. You only make it worse. So if we continue to treat them the way we do, by either ignoring them or trying to cane them or punishing them without identifying the root cause of where the situation is coming from, then we may not be solving the problem on the long run. He or she may scale through school and then graduate into the outer society and continue that way. And then I know that many schools are particular about their alumni. So it is not just enough that a child has graduated from your school, you are free from them. What image of the school do they portray outside? When they say this child attended so and so a school, I'm sure the school will be concerned about the kind of behavior. We've heard of situations where some schools have threatened to withdraw the certification that they issued to an individual because of their behavioral conduct, not necessarily their intellectual prowess. So behavior is also part of the way when they go to school. So that's why it is important for us to pay attention to their mental health, because to a large extent, it affects the way they behave. So as we pay attention to anxiety disorders, and then to mood disorders, we also need to pay attention to eating disorders, because at adolescents, that is one of the major things that they are concerned with. Many of them are concerned about their body shape, their body type, and then the opinions of their colleagues about them. So those things affect the way they carry on, the way they behave, towards other things, for instance, food. And then we also need to pay attention to personality disorder. Then we talked about the causes of mental health disorders. We said there are other people induce causes that stem from what other people do. So we are looking primarily at children, like I've mentioned and continue to emphasize. The way we carry ourselves as adults in the presence of children can, induce mental health conditions in them. And life can also play out. So to a large extent, it is our duty also as adults to protect our children and do the much that we can do. Pray if you can, do everything that you can do to ensure that our children are safe, so that they are not exposed to the dangers or the vicissitudes of life. And then that now leaves a scar in their minds as they develop. Then coming to the area where I mentioned earlier, self-induced. Many children, many adolescents, many young adults are not able to self-regulate. So the way they process information is not top-notch. It's not with adequate information. Wisdom is not their major strength. So that is where we come in as adults. We need to help them, interpret some of the information they are receiving. In counseling, in behavioral therapy, we believe that the stimulus within the environment and the way it is processed in the mind of the individual leads to whatever way they behave eventually. So that processing, that interpretation, we can manage those two, the stimulus and the processing, the way they analyze information, so that it will help them to behave better. So we may not be able to manage all the stimulus in the environment because you can't, control everybody around your children, but you can help them to interpret information accurately. So when a child sees the way some other person behaves, and then they want to talk about it with you, pay attention, listen to them, and help them to, properly position what they have seen, because they may see it and feel that it is the right way to behave. But that's 5 minutes attention and talk that you give to them will help them to see that that is an improper way of behaving. Or, oh, this person may be doing like this because of ABC. Is not necessarily the case. So that's time that you give to them to be able to process, analyze adequately that information is the gap between a healthy mental state and an unhealthy one. So these things are the first aids that we can do at home. And then when it gets out of hand, if you feel that you do not have the time, or maybe the situations have gotten out of your hand, you need to quickly call in an expert, someone who will be able to spend time with your child or with children in school and then talk them through, because a lot of these things are things that can be resolved when we talk through the information that children have received, because all of these things stem from the information. Like I said earlier, it's about perception. Stress is about perception. Depression is about perception. Everything, anxiety is about perception. How do you perceive the world? What do you tell yourself? And because children are weak in their minds, they are not able to, self-regulate. They consume these things and it begins to play out in their lives, either at their own level or later on in life. So, but if they have somebody who will be able to sit with them and help them talk through these things, and that is the duty, first of all, of parents. And then we have experts, we have professionals who do these things for a living. So we need to also consult with them if we need further assistance. So the work is many. A lot of people have said parenting is a full-time job. It's not something we do and then cede our responsibilities to others. And then we talked about the symptoms. The most important thing we need to look at in terms of symptoms is when you find out that, when you notice a break from the norm, a break from the usual, a child that's previously an outgoing child suddenly becomes withdrawn, is a red flag. Or a child that is usually withdrawn, or maybe is an introvert, and suddenly begins to want to be outgoing, it's also a sign you need to pay attention to. You need to find out, sit down with the child and find out what is triggering this change. Anything that marks a significant change in that child, either at home or in school, is a sign, is something to note. And then a lot of these things, like we said yesterday, go unchecked, go unnoticed because we lack information. So parents need to pay more attention to children. Teachers need to pay more attention. School owners, school administrators need to pay more attention, because these signs are there. If we are observant, we will see them. The major challenge is that we are too busy to notice these things that are right in front of us. A child is calling for attention. Sometimes some of the behaviors we consider as stubbornness, those things we consider as a child just being stubborn, you are too disturbing, all of those things are the child's way of calling for attention. They are begging us to look at them, but we fail to notice it because we are too busy, we are too stressed, we are too engaged with other things to notice them. So children may not be able to express themselves, but through their behavior, they are calling for attention to something that is ailing them, either in their mind. If we sit with them, we will find out what it is. By ourselves, we'll be able to see. If we have the information, we'll be able to say, this is what this child is probably going through. You'll be able to guess, and then refer him or her to the experts to look at. So again, pay attention to any break, anything from the ordinary. A child doesn't want to play with his friends. A child is withdrawn. A child suddenly begins to, drop in grades, in performances, or maybe just the self-care begins to drop. Anything that is unusual, you notice it. Please sit with the child and have a heart-to-heart conversation. So today we want to look at what are the tasks for parents. We want to begin with this. We have looked at all of this information, and what are the things that you and I, as parents, as educators, ought to begin to do. So a lot of these things I have mentioned already, and I just want to put them in perspective so that we will not miss the information. Before we go on to that, I did mention earlier, so this is a statistics or a key facts of mental health, which was published by World Health Organization as early or as far back as November 2021. And it says that globally, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experience a mental disorder, accounting for 13% of the global burden of disease in this age group. That is 1 in 7 amongst 10 to 19-year-olds. This is focusing now on adolescents. Amongst 10 to 19-year-olds, 1 in 7 experiences a mental disorder, which is accounting for 13% of all the global burden of disease in that age group. So again, they have grouped mental health illnesses with other diseases, whether physical or mental. So it is important and these things are not Western. It's not something that goes on only in the Western world. It is also in our climes. It's also in our homes. We are just not paying attention to them. We just don't consider it important. But these things play out every day in our societies. So the importance of mental health, as I have stated at the beginning of today's session, is that it has a way of affecting every other thing. We know that the mind controls the body. The mind controls behavior. Everything that an individual does is first conceived or processed in the mind. Learning takes place in the mind. Behavior is conceived from the mind. So everything that we want our children to be or to become is something that they first become in their mind before we see the manifestation. So that is why we also need to pay attention to what goes on in the minds of these children and begin to take proper care of their minds. If I was to suggest, we should pay more attention to mental health than we do to physical health. But as usual, because we can see and touch physical health, we feel that it is more important than every other thing. So again, the World Health Organization is of the opinion that depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders are among the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents, which is why I've emphasized that we need to pay attention to anxiety disorders, to mood disorders, which is where depression comes in, and then personality disorder. Personality disorder is where all the behavioral disorders fall under. So we need to pay attention to them, all the sociopaths, psychopaths, antisocial behavior, dissociative behavior disorder. All of those things are parts of the personality disorder. We need to pay attention to them. Children who, when they behave in certain ways, you ask them, they say it is not me. They have an alter friend, somebody who they feel takes over their body and does certain things. It is not a demon possession. It is called dissociative disorder. That child feels that there's some other person that takes over his or her body and does certain things. And then when that thing is done, the person leaves. So it is a mental health condition that can also be, managed by a mental health expert. So the consequences of failing to address mental health or adolescent mental health conditions, may extend to adulthood, impairing both physical and mental health, and then limiting all the opportunities that the person may come across in life, which may lead to fulfillment in life. So again, this point cannot be overemphasized. If we pay less attention to mental health, we will also be impairing every other aspect of the individual life. And then it is said that suicide is the 4th leading cause of death amongst 15 to 29-year-olds. Imagine. So this is not very good statistics, but it's something to keep in mind and to begin to pay attention. We don't want to lose our children because of depression. We don't want to lose our children because of something that we fail to pay attention to. All right, so we move on quickly. So when we talk about the roles of parents and adults, teachers, educators, and all whatnot, the first question to ask ourselves is, how have we handled this situation? How have we handled mental health situation amongst our children? So some of these things that I have here are some of the ways that we have handled it, which are not very good, not very wise, not very educated. We have handled it very shabbily. So one of the ways we have handled it is that we have spiritualized the situation. We tend to spiritualize everything, especially in this part of the world. So we are a people that often tend to hide our irresponsibilities under prayers. When we are supposed to take action, we rather resort to praying. I would rather we pray and act than pray alone. And that is what we do. Even when we have physical illness, we do not only pray. We pray and we either take medications or we pray and we consult a medical health expert. But when it comes to mental health, we resort to spiritualizing all the situation. It's either a witchcraft attack, it's either the child is possessed, and then we have had a lot of cases where many children, especially in Nigeria, in some parts of this country, have been subjected to inhuman treatment because they have been accused of being possessed, whilst those children are just suffering from one mental health condition or the other. And I'm sure that you know these things. You've heard of this situation. We've heard of many cases in places like Akwa Ibom, in Cross Rivers, and then some other places. So a lot of children, some of them killed because they have been accused of, being possessed, when the situation is a simple case of mental health disorder. That if a mental health expert had been consulted, the children would have been helped to overcome that condition. But no, we would rather spiritualize it. We would rather consult an exorcist. We would rather consult a man of God, in quotes, who will subject the children to all forms of inhuman treatments, and then dehumanize them so that they are not, they lose themselves and drive them further down into the mental health spectrum. So we don't help these children when we resort to actions as such. We make their situations worse, and that is very, very distasteful. So instead of praying over everything, I'm not saying we should not pray. Like while I introduced myself yesterday, I'm a preacher. I believe in the power of prayer, but I am also an expert in this field, and I believe that prayer alone will not solve the problem. When we pray, we need to also act. Like the Bible will say, faith without work is dead. So when somebody comes down with a case of malaria, we do not only pray. We pray and then we take medication and the person gets well. The person has any other physical illness, we pray and then we consult a doctor and then the person gets well. That is how it is done. So when it comes to mental health, the same should apply. We should pray and then we should also seek the help of experts. Do the most you can do at home and then refer the child or the parents or the individual to a mental health expert, someone who is a trained psychologist, to walk the person through some of these things with simple psychotherapy, a talk therapy. The person will be able to overcome these things. Cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, all of these things work. We have seen them work and they continue to work, and the child will come back to normalcy if we are able to explore these opportunities. Another thing that we do very shamefully is that we stigmatize mental health conditions. We stigmatize them. We do not only spiritualize it, we stigmatize it. And then stigmatization has become one of the major reasons why a lot of people do not come out to own up when they have mental health conditions. We as a society, we label them with all forms of labels. We call them mad people, we call them lunatics, we call them crazy people, with all sorts of things. And then families hide their children that should already be receiving care. They hide them. They don't want people to know. A girl that is raped by some adults, instead of the child to receive care, the parents will rather hide the child because they don't want the family name to be shamed. And then the child grows up with that scar, and then he or she doesn't get better. So these things are things that we do as a society that makes our situation worse. And it is something that needs to be stopped. And we need to, as much as possible, speak up and then share proper information, educate people, enlighten people. I know that Nigeria is still coming of age when it comes to knowledge and information. However, we can play our part, which is one of the things that I've always also taken up with myself. I share a lot of information about this on my social media handles to educate people, to enlighten people. Mental illness is as much illness as physical illness. If we do not stigmatize people for having malaria and typhoid and all the other physical illness, why should we stigmatize people for mental illness? It is not the doing of the person that he or she comes down with mental illness. It is an illness that with proper care and medication can be overcome. So stigmatization is one of the ways we have responded to this, which is wrong and should be stopped. Another thing we have done wrongly is that we try to silence it. We try to silence the growing call for mental health conditions. So we need to check ourselves. Why do we tend to silence the cries of people for mental health? So we dismiss the need. We see situations that looks like mental health and we dismiss it. We say, oh, these ones are just trying to. So a lot of people see calls to attend webinars or programs that talk about mental health, and they just wave it off and say, oh, this is not what we are chasing. They feel that this is nothing, it's not important to them, but it is equally as important as every other thing else. And in fact, it is even more important because mental health affects everything that we do. It is mind over matter. Everything we do in life stems from the mind. The mind controls every of our action. This rate of our success in life is determined by the state of our mental health. But yet, a lot of people tend to dismiss these things. We do not pay attention to them. So we tend to not prioritize it. When we hear people talk about it, we just wave it off with the hand. So we also stereotype people who have mental health conditions. We discriminate against them, and then we stereotype them. We give them a label. We can probably label that family as one who is having a case of lunacy. They have this one or that one amongst them, and that is very, very shameful and unbecoming of us as a society. And these things are things that have happened many, many years, on counting. A lot of families, you hear people say things like they don't marry from that family because they have a history of ABC. And these things are just very sad. So it is again a result of the lack of information that people have, and then they begin to blacklist or stereotype against certain people or certain group of individuals because they feel that they have a history. Maybe one person came down with a certain condition in that family, and then everybody in that family is tagged with that identity. Maybe it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And this is the generality of how we have responded to mental health conditions, which I feel we need to mention first before we talk about what we can do to prevent it. So we need to check ourselves and ensure that we are not contributing to the problem. All right, so having said that, the next question to ask is, what should we do instead? What should we rather do? What should we do? So what are the things, what are the right steps? We have looked at the things that we have done wrongly, and these things have been done over time. So it is going to be probably an Herculean task in trying to undo the errors of the past. However, the time to start is now. So it is said that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. So if we have failed in the past, we cannot continue to cry over spilled milk. We can rather turn a new leaf and begin to act differently. And some of the things that we can do when it comes to mental health is to seek information, educate yourself, and also educate others like we are doing here. So what we are sharing here is what we call mental health education. A lot of this information are not out there, even though they are out there. The information are out there in the open, but we do not pursue these things. We do not consider it very important, but it is important. So we need to seek information. We need to educate ourselves and educate those around us. And when we talk about mental health education, we need to also educate the children. So as parents, pay attention to mental health information or mental health education, and also share it with your children. As school owners or school administrators, we also need to share this information with the children. We need to ensure that our children in schools know and value the mental health of themselves and their colleagues. Children contribute to the mental health or mental illness or mental health disorders of their colleagues. And one thing that will, reverse the trend is when they understand how their actions contribute to the illness or to the disorder in their colleagues. So a bully, for instance, who have been driven to being a bully because of what he or she has experienced, will, appreciate how his actions affect the health, especially mental health of his colleagues. So if we share mental health education with children in school, no matter the level, at primary, at secondary, junior secondary, senior secondary level, it will help them to appreciate, how their own actions can affect the community. So it is something that we need to pay attention to. Educate yourself, educate others, educate the children that you have or you manage. And then we also need to be open about mental health. That much has been emphasized. We need to be open about it. We don't have to, it's not a secret. It's not something spooky. It's not a mysterious thing. It's not myths. It's not a spiritual issue. It is something that is as much science as every other thing that we have. So we need to be open about it as a society. We need to also, embrace discussions around mental health and give it all the attention that it requires. We need to also be conscious of the language we use. We should stop all forms of labeling. We should stop labeling people, stop stereotyping. We need to be conscious of our language. So, for instance, you do not say that somebody is mentally disabled. There's nothing like such. Somebody is mentally disabled. The person may be having a mental illness. He or she is not disabled. So I was listening to a radio program earlier in the day, and then somebody was talking about people who are physically challenged, and then he used the word physically disabled. There's no human being that is disabled. They may be challenged, they may be, impaired in some areas, but they are not disabled. So the same way, nobody is mentally disabled. Even those who we consider to be cerebral palsies and all whatnot, all of those ones who have learning difficulties, they are not learning disabled. They are only learning challenged. They have learning challenges and they are not disabled. So we need to be conscious of the language we use to describe children or describe people within our space. Some of these languages, affect the self-esteem of children. So another thing that we need to do is that we need to encourage equality between physical and mental illness. So we need to continue to see them as one. They are not separate. Every human being has a mind, and then we have a body. So as much as we can have physical illness, we can also have mental illness. So there shouldn't be a dichotomy between mental illness and physical illness. So we need to see them as, both illnesses that any normal human being can come down with. Just as a normal person can come down with a physical illness, a normal human being can also come down with a mental illness. And the way we embrace it will also go a long way to help us to solving the problem. So we need to show compassion. We need to create an atmosphere for support. We need to be able to, like I've always emphasized, create a culture or an atmosphere for people to ventilate, speak. So it would be nice if we have the opportunity, like some of the things we see in some of our popular shows, where people sit down on a dining table and talk about their day. Just reflect back, how was your day? Just share. And then in an atmosphere that is non-judgmental, everybody is open to talking about what their day was in school, at work, and all sorts. So we need to show compassion, and we need to also create a support system around ourselves. And the first place that should happen is the home. The second place is in school. We need to create that environment consciously. It's not something that will happen by itself. It doesn't happen by stumbling on it. It is a conscious effort by parents at home or by school administrators to create an atmosphere or an opportunity for people to sit down in a non-judgmental setting where they can ventilate their feelings, and then somebody listens to them and then guides them in how to analyze, how to process the information, and how to react or act differently from the way they are acting. So also we need to be honest about treatment. So if people are going through treatment, we need to be honest about it. So it is not just what we can do, it is about the person receiving the treatment here now. So if either an adult or a child is receiving treatment for mental health, we need to also be, how do I say it? We need to be honest about it. It's not something to hide about. So we need to be observant of the early signs and the warnings, like we have mentioned. What are those things that we need to pay attention to? I have always emphasized that the information is always there. It's always there. It's always in our presence. So if we are observant, if we pay attention, we will notice that somebody is going through a situation that requires our attention. So if we do not pay attention, we will not see them. Your children, or the children of your neighbors, or the children of anybody in the community, or the children in the school that you manage, any child who you observe that is behaving in certain ways, pay attention. That is the duty we owe to children. Remember, like I said, they cannot regulate themselves, but we as adults can regulate them. Those days, we used to have a communal effort. We used to say in our climb that it takes one person to give birth to a child, but a community to raise them. But that culture is fast leaving us because everybody is now busy chasing after daily bread, or everybody is now suspicious of the other. Everybody is now a suspect. Parents don't want any other person to put an eye, as it were, on their children. And then everybody is minding their business. You don't want to be accused of one thing or the other. So, but we are losing a lot of value, a lot of benefits by such, and that is not a good way to build society. Another thing again is that we need to seek, professional help. That cannot be overemphasized. There are so many things that we cannot handle on our own. We need to seek. So if as a school you have a psychologist or you have a counselor, it is important that children are referred to. Unfortunately, in many schools, they only refer children to counselors when the child is not performing well academically. But when it comes to behavioral, emotional, social, we don't even notice it, let alone referring them. And this is very sad. So a lot of children are going through social, emotional, and psychological downtime that is then affecting their academic performance. We only notice it when the performance begins to go down. But we would have been able to solve the problem if we had seen it earlier. So when children begin to show these signs, we need to quickly refer them to the counselor if we have one. And if we do not have, I think it is high time we make recommendations that the school, every school, should have a counselor. In fact, in the National Policy on Education, the Nigerian National Policy on Education, it is a strong recommendation that every school should have a counselor. But again, who is monitoring? Who is enforcing it? Nobody. School owners or school administrators don't either know or do not care. They feel that once we have teachers in all levels, we are okay. So the students will be fine. Meanwhile, the emotions, the emotional well-being, physical well-being of the child or the learner affects their academic performance. And then we blame it all on their poor reading habits. A child who is doing well and begins to do poorly, or a child who is even not doing well previously, but just consistently performing poorly, something is triggering it, something is at the roots of that poor performance. What have we done differently than scolding the child? What have we done differently than punishing the child? What have we done differently? How have we genuinely seek to help that child to find the root cause of the problem and help them to overcome that challenge? We just label them, we stigmatize them, we abuse them, we either punish them, we do all sorts except the real care or solution that the child requires. A lot can be solved if we pay attention to their mental health, because that is where, in the first place, that learning takes place. A child cannot learn if the atmosphere is not conducive, and the atmosphere in their environment is not as important as the atmosphere in their mind. The mental atmosphere is more important than the environmental atmosphere, than the physical atmosphere. So as a school administrator, we need to pay attention to that. As a parent, we need to pay attention to that. It's very important that the mental atmosphere, the mind of the child, is conducive for learning to take place. What do we do at home? What do we do in schools? How does the child process information? How are we helping them to, declutter a lot of the information that they have received? How are we helping them to remove some of the excess information that they have seen in television? On some parents sit down and watch some programs with their children, like some of the movies that we watch, especially our homegrown movies, sad to say, some of the movies in this part of the country, the Yoruba movies, a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of abuse, verbiage, a lot of, these things, and then you sit with children and watch them, and then the children are learning these things. How do you expect them to behave better in the future? So a lot of things need to be taken into cognizance, and then we begin to act differently. All right, so having said all of those, the next important area that we need to look at is intervention programs. What are the intervention programs that are available for us to begin to draw this discussion to a close? We have spoken so much about the types of mental illness that are available. We have spoken about the growing states. We have seen a lot of statistics that point to the fact that this is a growing pandemic. We have also seen how we have acted that is not helping the situation and what we can do differently. Now, what are some of the intervention programs that are available either at the professional level or at home? What can we do? So, but before we go into this, I would like to just pause for a few minutes, maybe and just take some reactions based on what we have discussed. If you have questions, let's just interact so that I do not do all the talking. Let's have your contributions or questions or observation as much as what we have discussed is concerned. So the floor is open, the mic is open to you, just to raise issues or join issues wherever. Anybody wants to join, want to, ask a question, wants to raise an issue? Yes, you can unmute yourself and just speak if you have something to say or question to ask. The idea of this is to listen to you as well, as much as share information. Okay, so I guess we do not have questions. I will continue. So what are some of the available options or some of the available remedy options that we can explore when it comes to mental health? All right, so like we have said earlier, this is a global crisis. It's not limited to the Western world. It's something that is everywhere, in Africa, in Europe, North America, South America, and everywhere in Asia. It is a growing concern. So what does the expert say, or what are the experts saying? Sorry, this is typed wrongly. It says, what do the experts are saying? Let me quickly correct that. So it is what the experts are saying. All right. So what are the experts saying when it comes to mental health? So adolescence is a crucial period for developing social and emotional habits. It is important for mental well-being. So protective and supportive environment in the family and at school and in the wider community are also important. So this is according to WHO in November 2021. And then the WHO African region, the director of WHO African region made this statement. It says across Africa, more than 116 million people are estimated to be living with mental health conditions. Suicide rates remains concerning, as are the experimental rate of drug or exponential rate of drug and alcohol uses and abuse among adolescents as low as 13. So again, this just brings to the fore that what we are discussing is something that is already receiving the attention from the experts, but how are we at the home and at the school levels, how are we treating this very important topic? So it is said here that children as low as 13 are already abusing substance, alcohol, and drug. And that is children at school level, children at homes, children who are not able to stand on their own, children who the constitution at all levels, at every country, still consider as minors. Yet they have already been exposed to things like this. And one of the things that contributes to mental health disorder is substance abuse, either alcohol or drugs. Both of them are at the base of mental health disorders. Let's move on quickly. So intervention programs. So all right, so when you break down the word intervention, what you get is the word intervene, which usually means to interrupt a situation that could cause harm. So when we talk about intervention, we are referring to the programs that intervene, that prevents a situation from going from bad to worse. We already have a situation in our hands, but we do not want it to get worse. So that is why we are talking about intervention programs. We need to have programs that help us to curb the rising cases of mental health disorders amongst children. So in the cases of mental health and or addiction, interventions can be any type of therapeutic approach meant to help someone take the next step towards recovery. That is what intervention is about. So any step, any intervention program, or any approach that can help someone take the next step from where they are currently towards recovery is what we refer to as intervention. And that can be done at the home level, it can be done at schools, it can be done at a mental health facility, depending on the severity of the case. Intervention usually involves a support system or a support team that usually includes the family and friends and a professional. So when we talk about intervention programs, we are referring to all the approach that brings together the support team. So in helping somebody who have been diagnosed with a mental health condition to get better, the family is important. The immediate social circle of that person is important. That is why all the things that we discuss under this aspect is very, very key. Because if we lose track of it, then we will not be able to help the person get better. All of these things that we can do here are part of the things that a support team is supposed to do. So the mental health expert or the psychologist is not going to do all of this, but the home, the family, the parents, teachers, school owners, the school counselors can help them, do all of this and help them build a support team. Because at the end of the day, it is that support team that will help the person to be able to get better. The person who is delusional, the person who is hallucinating, it is his or her support team that is always present when such breaks come around that will help him or her to survive that episode. For instance, somebody who is suicidal, if he or she is left to himself without a support team, without care, without proper attention, they may succeed in taking their lives. Or somebody who is suffering from panic disorder, When they come into their episodes, that break points, it is the support team that will help them to be able to, go through that phase. Just continue to reassure them that it is not the case. We may not be able to dismiss, we should not rather dismiss what they are going through, but we can help them, overcome, or manage that situation, as we are going to see as we go along. So when we talk about intervention, we have several aspects of the intervention programs. We have what we call as the crisis intervention programs. We have the intervention counseling, and then we also have the psychological intervention. Those are the three major intervention programs that exist. And then in terms of crisis, it is where the situation, the person who is suffering from the mental health condition is already at a crisis point, where probably they are suffering a present mental breakdown or a present crisis situation. Maybe they have come into a situation where they are agitating, they are probably struggling, or suffering from the panic attack, or whatever it is that the situation is. At that particular point in time, the people around them, again referring to the support system, need to pay attention. The primary intervention program at that time is to ensure their safety so that they do not harm themselves or harm others. You will notice people who, for instance, take some certain substance, drugs, for instance, like some of the substances that we have in our environment today. They call some of them crystal meth, they call some of them loud, and all of those things. Once some people ingest it, either for the first time or otherwise, you will notice the way you see some of them. If you check some videos online or you read some reports, you notice how some of them react. You just see somebody just take off running without care for whether it can be knocked down by a vehicle or if there's a gutter or a canal, just takes off running because the drug has altered the brain chemistry, and they are now beginning to behave in a certain way. They are no longer in touch with reality. At that point in time, the people around them need to quickly arrest them. When I mean arrest, just apprehend them, hold them down, and do whatever it is that you can do to ensure that they do not harm themselves or harm others. Many of the street urchins that we have in our societies today, many of them are on substance, and they need this substance to stimulate action. And once they do that, they go into fits of destruction, manifesting all sorts of social misbehavior and all the behaviors that we consider undesirable. So in a crisis situation, the person experiencing the mental health distress might be in immediate danger, either to himself or to those around them. So in that situation, the primary focus, like I've said, is to keep them safe. The safety of the individual who is experiencing the mental health crisis, or the safety of the people around them. If you go to some places where people with mental health are taken care of, you will notice that some of them, sometimes they come into a crisis point, and then the caregivers need to, sometimes they resort to giving them sedatives so that they remain calm, because they may hurt themselves. So a lot of these things are things that are done. So it is when you have those crisis points, and a crisis point is when the mental situation takes over the person, and then they begin to either act in certain ways, either violently or want to just go into some fits of rage. They want to, sometimes it's as a result of frustration. Some persons may be in a particular location for a long time and then they get frustrated. Yes, they have mental health conditions. They are in that facility for them to be taken care of, but they feel that they are being isolated. They feel that they are being restricted. They feel that they are being imprisoned. There's still some level of mental cognition going on. And then when they become frustrated, they want to lash out. They want to manifest their frustration, sometimes rightly or wrongly. But the people who are caregivers need to ensure their safety and the safety of the other persons in their facility. So what they do at that time, if they cannot, keep them in one place, they probably will induce them with some sedative that will help them to remain calm and all sorts. So all of those things are intervention programs that have been used And then one thing that can also help in such situations is for people to, find opportunities to go out. That's why some of those facilities, they have environments where people can interact with nature, just so that they see the sun, they engage in play, in dance, in learning, all sort of things to engage their mind so that they don't stay in one particular location for too long and become frustrated. And then we talk about the intervention counseling, which is something that also is, which is another level of intervention program. So counseling, which is another name for psychotherapy, is through counseling, patients will learn to healthily cope with, well, we learn healthy coping mechanisms that will handle stress, as well as how to manage their mental health symptoms in general. So the counseling that we are referring to here is the normal talk therapy that a regular counselor or psychologist can render to anybody who is going through mental health issues. And this has been emphasized variously throughout this webinar. Many counselors are available. Some of them don't even have enough work to do. Some of them are posted to schools. Some of them are employed in schools. And sometimes they just, I once worked in a school where the school counseling office is just a place where the counselors relax and rest and maybe sleep. They do almost nothing. The counselors are as busy as teachers teaching various subjects in the classroom. Students don't consult. The school has not created a culture where the counselors engage with students in the classroom. So it's when you see the counselors in their office, they are either conducting a research, or they are sleeping, or they are relaxing from the stress of the day. And that is wrong. The counseling office needs to be a busy place where children go in to seek mental help. Just as we should also have counseling offices, counseling outfits in many places in the society, in the community, where parents can take their children to seek mental health. Just as we have health facilities, physical health facilities, we should also have mental health facilities. And when we talk about mental health facilities, we're not referring to psychiatry alone. There is the psychiatry aspect of mental health. There's also the psychological or psychotherapy aspect. We're going to see that in a bit, so that we'll know that there are two professionals that handles mental health issues, and both of them are adequately and aptly qualified to handle mental health conditions. They are not averse to each other. One of them employs the clinical aspect. We'll see that as we go along. So we have counseling intervention programs that are available. I myself am a trained counselor, and I also studied educational counseling. That is my major area of strength. And I seek to assist students and then teachers to understand these things, and then help people walk through their mental health situations. Is something that we have been trained to observe, to identify, to diagnose. There are tests, materials that you can use to diagnose people with certain problems, and then help them walk through. There are theories, there are approaches to all of these things. So we have the behavioral therapy, we have the cognitive therapy, we have the psychodynamic therapy. All of these things, we're going to see them as we go on. So the intervention programs include counseling interventions. Another one again is, the psychological intervention. Psychological intervention is similar to counseling intervention. It works to help patients with long-term recovery, especially in cases of substance abuse. So this one is similar to counseling, but more related with psychiatry, especially because the people that the intervention is meant for here are people who have cases with substance abuse. Those who have, either been diagnosed with drug abuse, or when we talk about substance abuse, we are talking about drug or alcohol that have altered their brain chemistry, and they need to, walk through a process of overcoming the addiction. So people who are struggling with addiction of substances, those ones are the ones that can undergo psychological interventions. where they are withdrawn from society and go through rehabilitation. So the rehabilitation programs include a talking therapy as well as a drug therapy, where they are, helped to overcome the addiction that the body has come to recognize over the substances that they have been ingesting over time. So all cases of mental or substance-induced mental disorder should be subjected to psychological intervention. So most studies suggest that for mental health, also for major mental health disorders, so most studies suggest that for major mental health disorders, a treatment approach involving drugs and psychotherapy, which is a talk therapy, is more effective than either treatment method used alone. So we have two major types of treatments that can be used as interventions for mental health conditions. There is the clinical, and then there's the psychotherapy. The psychotherapy is what we call the talking therapy, which is what counselors do. The psychiatrists, who are medical doctors, but taking care of the mental health. Those ones employ both psychotherapy and clinical therapy, clinical aspects. So when we talk about the psychotherapy, which is the talk therapy, these are some of the approaches that can be used to help individuals overcome their behavior, mental conditions. We have the behavioral therapy. Behavioral therapy is where we try to alter the stimulus in the environment. We find out what are those things that are causing the person to behave in a certain way. And then we adjust the stimulus in the environment so that we can ensure that the person behaves differently. That is the behavioral approach to solving behavioral problems, which are also mental problems. When we talk about cognitive therapy is of the opinion that it is the way the person thinks and processes information that is leading them to behave in the way they are behaving. Remember, like I said earlier, children are not able to regulate themselves. They are not able to process information adequately. So what they do is that they take this information and they begin to act out. So if a parent who is knowledgeable about these things, or even if they are not, but sees this and then refers them to a counselor, and the counselor is able to help the child to declutter, to remove some, or help them process the information that they have in their mind, it will ultimately alter the negative behavior. So that is the approach of cognitive therapy. Then we have psychodynamic therapy, which is the one that Sigmund Freud used mostly. Psychodynamic has to do with, what's it called? When you subject people to a situation where they are in trance-like situation, they sit down or lie down in a chair in the counselor's office or in the psychotherapist's office, and then they are induced into a coma sort of feeling, and then they begin to revisit their subconscious and then say anything in their mind. The counselor is asking them questions, and they are just to dig out the deep-rooted information in their mind that could be a reason for them to behave in certain ways. So the same is supportive psychotherapy, which is similar to psychodynamics, and then the interpersonal therapy, which is the therapy that has to do with helping the people, empowering the people around the person suffering from the mental health to be able to render adequate support to the person. And then we also have psychoanalysis. So all of these things are psychotherapy approach to solving problems. And all of these things a counselor can render. But when the difference between the counselor and the psychiatrist is the drug approach, which is where the psychiatrists come in. If a situation requires drug therapy, then that person should be referred to a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who handles mental health condition. So the fields in mental health, the experts in the mental health, we have the psychologist, we have the psychiatrist. We have them, the psychologist is also called counselors, and then the psychiatrist is also called clinical psychologist. So psychology, the use of psychotherapy, which is talk therapy, to help patients heal from trauma and improve their mental health. While psychiatry is a branch of medicine. It's a branch of medicine that focuses on diagnosing and treating mental health disorders. It involves talk and drug therapy. So the difference between the regular counseling and psychotherapy is that the counselor does not use drugs, while um, the psychiatrist employs the use of drugs. Both of them are therapists and they are experts in the field of mental health analysis, diagnosis, and treatment. So I did mention that I will be taking some real life situations which you are to supply. If you have any situation either at school or at home that you feel we need to talk about or that you need an expert opinion on, this is the point where we'll share them. When we talk about abnormal psychology refers to abnormal behavior in children, that behaviors that are considered abnormal. So it is the study of those behavior that is referred to as abnormal psychology. So I have titled this abnormal psychology because I want you to have the perspective. What are those behaviors that you consider abnormal, either in the school or at home? And then you want us to, proffer some expert opinion on them. This is the point where we'll look at that. So if you have any live situations, you can share with us, and I'll be grateful to, give an opinion on it if you will be willing to share. All right, who wants to share with us what are those real life situations that you have and that you want us to look into at school, at home, or wherever? So this webinar will not be complete if we do not take some real life situations from you who is experiencing it. I don't want to do all the talking. I could easily come up with scenarios, with examples, but again, it will just be me talking or just make believe. But if you have real situations that you are currently experiencing or handling, or the reason that prompted you to attend this webinar, you want to share with us, and so that we can give an expert opinion on them. Speak, please unmute yourself and speak, or probably you can raise your hand and I will acknowledge you. Or if you want to drop a chat in the comment section, I could read it out and then comment on it. So we still have a few minutes. This is just 2:30. We have about 30 minutes to round off this session. So we can use this as an opportunity to just discuss
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes,
I just want to, it's like while I registered for this program is actually for me to get a solution, because I have one over all that you have discussed, I have one at hand.
Oh, wow.
And I've been looking at when will this situation end.
Mm.
But all that you have been, I'm following from detail to detail, and the person that has the challenge is right by my side. We were listening together, and I was asking her, "Are you following? Now, can we find out where the problem started from? And so, what is the solution? How do we move forward? How do we get out of this situation?" I got her involved. I was even asking her anytime I was saying, "Did you understand that?" He said, "Yes." Okay, so okay, what are you feeling now? Just as you described that, that one saying that something is just working in me and I don't know what is it, because we have noticed that behavioral part of it.
Okay.
Normally what she will not have, if she's in the normal senses, she would likely not want to do it, is what she will want to do. And I was asking her that, okay, see, did you hear what I just said? Why will you always want to go and buy biscuits even without holding money? You will collect, but they know I will come and settle the bill. But I said, even for that age, I followed every detail because really I saw that thing. I don't even know who posted it on my email, but I thank God for that person because it was something that I was like, what is the solution? Every process you have said is what we have gone through.
Wow.
It started at the age of 16 when she was supposed to write WAEC. But this child is a very brilliant, highly intelligent girl. Had double promotion. In fact, in junior school, she will, out of 13 subjects, she would have taken like 10 coming first in math, first in English. And after that, of course, we changed the school, said that it was a local champion. So we took her to another school. And by the time she got to SS3, those things started showing face. And now recollect that there was a report card when she was small, and they were saying that she used to sleep in the class. Is it that she doesn't sleep well? She grew up with my auntie because when I had her, I was in my final year and I needed to go and serve. So I had to take her down to my mom. My mom handed her over to my auntie that was just raising our own children so that they can grow together. So that was between the age of 1 and 5, but I used to visit her like 2 weeks over the weekend. So I was not trying to, okay, can we find out where this problem, does it mean something went wrong between that age, 1 and 5? But she joined me at the age of, I think, 7, when I got married, when she was now 7. By the time she entered secondary school, she has joined me.
Okay.
She was doing well until age 16, when we started noticing those behavior, we started noticing some changes in her. I employ a lesson teacher, she would just be laughing. The teacher said, did I weave on my body or what is wrong? But we didn't know that it was a case of mental health until she now, I think one day she was in coma. She came back from school in school uniform and she was in coma. We were so afraid, we took her to the hospital. She was on that bed for 3 days. But by the time she came out of that coma, the brain was turned upside down. And of course, it affected her. And they were at the point of writing WAEC. In fact, it was February, I will always remember, 2008 or so. When did you finish? Okay, 2007. Okay, they were to start mock, but she came back from school on Thursday. They are preparing for mock by next week, Monday. And she went into coma. So she was there like that in the hospital for 3 days. But the third day, on Sunday, she finally, no, on Monday, she woke up from that coma. And the first thing she remembered was that she was preparing for mock that was to start on Monday. So she jumped up and said, yeah, my uniform, this and this. She just suddenly remembered that she came back from school, she went to bed, but she didn't know what happened thereafter until like 3 to 4 days after. So since that time, the problem started. So she started for the WAEC. Even in that state, even the school said no, she's not in the good state, but because of the type of her that she always want to study on her own, very brilliant, very agile, she started for the WAEC. After the WAEC, the result was not too good. The school registered, I said, because she was not in the right state of mind, they took her up that, okay, come and re-register the second year. They allowed her because they knew that she didn't perform well, but she tried because of the fact that she used to read ahead. And so that problem started since that time, 2007. She did the WAEC the second time. She entered university. So we now said, okay, you are not going to public university because of bullying, and they can, try to usurp, try to play on our intelligence. I said, okay, go to private where you'll probably be focused, and they'll be able to take care of you. I think that was even worse. Because you mentioned something like being isolated, frustration, imprisonment.
Yeah.
So that was manifested even at the private school, university, where I was now called to come and carry her one day. They were choked in one room, and she couldn't absorb that kind of people, from different homes. And this is somebody that she's an introvert, very quiet but brilliant. So when she could not, the brain was already working zigzag. It wasn't there. So the thing started. So I was called upon that something happened, that she was like, they're talking irrationally, and I went to pick her. So from there, of course, she became she was taken to UCH. Okay, before that time, she was taken to UCH. Immediately, we noticed that, because I have a medical people around me, my mom being a nurse. So we took her to the hospital. She was admitted in the psychiatric aspect of the part of the UCH. So from there on and on, from UCH, we have taken her to Arrow. In fact, now she's still there as an outpatient. So it has affected her studies. She couldn't even complete the university education. She's been going, anytime it is, I think, anxiety, whatever was about. Once exam is getting close by, there's so much pressure, she will break down before the examination. So she couldn't have a stable and a continuous education in the university, despite that it was a private. So after spending like 3 years, we removed her. But when she was okay, she came up, she said she wanted to go and do psychology because she wanted to know the root of the problem. Okay, we went back, we applied, and she changed her course. She started the psychology. But the moment the exam was about starting, the thing will just show face. Though she was on medication all through, but because she doesn't have access to the home and we don't have access to her all the time, I think the thing grew worse. We must probably would have kept her back and not allow her to go far, or where they will be kept and isolated. So she wasn't taken to her medication as she ought to. So the thing there will always be a relapse. And that went on like that. Supposed to have finished 2012 from the university, but because of that situation, we have to know, okay, you are wasting money. This is a private university. We are paying so much. We removed her. We put her to go and learn how to do something that, okay, when you are okay, you go back to university. There's no time you wake up that you will not go back to school and get your certificate. So we put her into another, using skill, cake, and so on. She was doing very well. She has been used to studying, doing things. So she will do her things, but she won't relate with anybody. She won't talk to them. Even at home, she found she doesn't relate with the younger ones. Even though they share the same, so that we don't isolate her too much. But after a time, she started, being violent with them. Any little thing, a rage, she just be shouting, they couldn't understand, they couldn't comprehend that situation. But this is somebody they've been growing up with. But when suddenly it went to that, of course, they withdrew themselves from her. And that has grown over the years. She has been on that medication. She still keep her appointment with a outpatient at Arrow. But I was now that, when will this situation end? So all the therapy you have said, we have done the medical, we have done the psychotherapy. I've taken her for counseling. Maybe if she doesn't want to tell me, maybe she will be able to, open up to somebody, the talking therapy. And we have also done the medical. All that you are saying here is what we have done. We have done even the spirituality that you have mentioned too. We still did that. They said there was no hope. They were doing that. But when I saw that, that one, if I didn't take this girl, she would die. Because once she react, they've just been using her with sedatives. I had to go and bring her. It was when I brought her back and she was reacting violently that I took her to Arrow. So Arrow was able to manage her. She was on admission. They were able to manage her. So she's an outpatient. Arrow will still keep appointments. She's on medication. But the question is, when will she totally be stable?
Mm.
Of course, age is not on her side. You can imagine at the age of 16 up till 31. You're 31 now. Hmm? You're 31. Uh-huh. So, and she's still withdrawn from in fact, now she doesn't even want to do anything. She doesn't want to work. She just wants to sit in one place, staring at the wall. So
Mm.
we force her to do things. In fact, all that you have said about their trait and character and everything, in fact, there isn't that even to bath become another problem. So I was just like, I thought you should be getting better. So why is he still going this way? So it was a thing of concern. So immediately I saw that thing, on my email, I said, I'm going to register. And that was reason why even though I'm an educationist. So it's still helping me because I'm also into a school advocacy program. And what you have said is going to help me because I'm going to give talk in some schools, which has to do with hope, don't give up. So I've picked some things too because I believe in learning. There's no end to learning. You learn anytime, any day. So we started this Zoom together. I said, come and sit with me. Even whether you want to hear, you don't want to hear, but I'll be like, are you following? Did you hear? Were you able to identify the problem? Where did it start from? No, of course, she just say something that doesn't go in line with. But I really appreciate all that you have said. That's why I'm sharing from own experience. This is a life experience of
Very.
what I've gone through, and the person going through it is right by my side.
Okay. So thank you, Ma, for sharing. That is a very, very insightful experience, and I quite sympathize with you. And so, as regards your question, when will it end? Let me say this way: I will join my faith with yours to believe that it will end soon. However, the intervention programs that you have already explored are the ways by which it could have ended if probably, but from what you have shared, I see that there have not been consistency in the intervention programs. So her case may be a case that requires psychiatry, which is the drugs, if it has been properly identified, and then also a therapy, which is the counseling therapy, to help her to recognize some of the things that identify some of the things that she's going through. So it's not something I'll be able to do from here. You need somebody to sit with her and then be able to mention one at a time, maybe some of the symptoms or some of the things that she is feeling in her mind. What are the things that she's going through? And then, if possible, you may also be able to interview that relative of yours where you dropped her when you were going to university, to find out if anything went on during that period that could have triggered something like this. Maybe she was subjected to some treatment. Some of these things may be a result of a ill treatment, or maybe an abuse or something that somebody suffered and then is now bottling it up and is now manifesting in many other ways. So again, you have also mentioned that there is an anxiety that is related to exams. So maybe there's something that is connected, because at 16, I can imagine that you'll be preparing for a final year exam at senior secondary. So what are the things that happen around that period within her and the place where she lived at that time, or the school where she was attending, that anytime examination comes is triggering that memory? It may not be exam per se, but probably that thing happened around the same period she's preparing for exams. So anytime exam comes up, she will now remember that thing, and then she will go into a state of shock or collapsing.
I'm listening.
All right, so it is important that we investigate this thing, because it is not something we can do until we are able to identify the root cause. We may not be able to specifically say this is what is the situation, because it's possible now for us to say, oh, she has a phobia for exam, which is a form of anxiety disorder. Because like you mentioned, anytime exam is coming close, either from that time till now, maybe even at university, she will react in certain way. But it may not necessarily be exam phobia. It may be that something happened at that time, maybe around that her 15, 16-year-old, when she was preparing for WAEC, something happened around that period that is related to the exam or related to where she's staying, that every time exam is coming, it triggers the memory of that event that she's suppressing. So that thing that she has not been able to express is what she's reliving probably every time she remembers the exam and remembers that event. She will now have a relapse. So somebody needs to sit with her and do what Sigmund Freud does, which is psychoanalysis, subject her to some sort of trance so that she can be able to, speak out that thing and then help her to overcome. So there is what she's going through may not be far from anxiety. She's having some repressed memory, possibly, that she is reliving every time exam is coming up. So that thing has now caused her to probably, locked up herself in her subconscious. So it is something that is workable. It is possible. It's if we don't identify the real cause of it, just administering drugs and all of those things may not necessarily solve the problem. So it requires that from what you have shared with me now, I can suggest or I can guess that it is around the border of anxiety disorder. So that thing is something that probably has happened to her, an experience she has had that is always being triggered, and she is remembering it every time exam is coming close, and that has also affected and impaired other levels of her relationships, her interaction with others. So it's you need to find, probably, I don't know if it is the same center where you're already consulting, where they're already taking care of her as an outpatient. Find somebody who you can trust to say, you need to sit with this lady and talk through. I know that they may be busy and may not have the time, but if you can get an opportunity from someone who can sit with her to be able to identify the root cause of this situation, find out what are the symptoms, what does she go through, what are the things that go through, and if she's able to express herself, at least she can answer questions. She's responding to you when you ask her questions. So it means that she's able to answer questions. She has enough cognitive function to be able to, if you can go to school, learn, and then prepare for exam, only that she may not be able to finish, but at least that gives her an advantage over some who have some level of impairment in their cognitive ability. So she may be able to answer questions reasonably if somebody sits with her and ask her some deep questions, having a list of questions. So what I can also do for you is I can probably do some, prepare a list of questions that you can ask her if she'll be willing to speak with you, because sometimes familiarity is not something that will help you to break through to her. If we can have a neutral person that she can trust, but again, the level of trust has to be there, non-judgmental, environment where she can speak freely without being judged or mocked. So if we have a list of questions to be able to identify the symptoms, what are the things she's going through in her mind, what are the ways she's feeling, what are the emotions that is coming up, and then how does she feel when the exams are coming up, and then you can probably do a mock situation. Try to set an exam for her. Maybe just inform her that on so day you are going to have an exam. Maybe just see how she reacts to it. Just you set an exam for her at home and see how she reacts. If she's able to go through that without any reaction, then you will now begin to imagine what the school environment will look like. So you can try several things. Create a mock environment where she is able to relieve whatever it is that is playing out in her mind. And then you'll be able to then identify the situation. If you are able to create that environment, you'll be able to identify. If it's related to exam, then when you say, inform her that you want to set an exam, you probably will see a sign. If it is not related to exam, you continue to try different things, just like the doctors will do. You eliminate certain cases after tests, if it is not the case, you eliminate until you identify the real reason that she's. So it may take a while, and it's something that will end eventually, but she needs your help. You also need her help. She also needs to be willing. She needs to try her best. Yes, we will not blame the victim here. We will not blame the person who is sick. We will rather continue to encourage them to make the necessary efforts and just speak up. What are you feeling? So sometimes just sit with her, let her share with you what are you feeling, what's going on in the mind, and then just take notes. Just take note of those things. If you ask her over a period of time, maybe like in the space of 1 week, you ask her like 3 times, you give her some days apart, you ask her again, you give her some, then you compare the notes of her first answer, the second answers, and the third answers. Are there similarities? Are there things that align? So whatever is consistent, you will begin to suspect, and then you now know what areas to begin to identify. So these are some of the things we do in the psychological centers, where we walk patients through, but they have to speak up. They have to be able to, or people who know. So it is something that you can also observe. So if you have identified that maybe school triggers some of those things, you can allow her to study at home, and then maybe some of these exams can also be written at home. If it is an online course, she can take the online course and then do some crash programs that will at least give us some level of certification. All learnings are not done in the four walls of the school or university. You can learn from the comfort of your home if she is open to that. And then as far as interaction and socialization is concerned, it is a work in progress. So we need to be able to understand what goes on in her mind and know the areas where we don't need to step into, so that we don't continue to push her away, because they can get sucked into their mind and get locked up and not open up and relate with others. And we don't want that. So as much as possible, we need to encourage her to continue to speak up, to share with you what the information, what she's going through in her mind. So, but again, my recommendation would be that whatever treatment she's going through now, she needs to stay faithful to it. And then you also need to find somebody who will sit with her and try to extract vital information from her by simply asking her some basic questions like, no, those the same questions we ask when people are not feeling well physically. How do you feel? Where does it hurt? How does it? So you try to ask the same questions from different angles. What are you seeing? What do those kind of questions when you sit down and face the wall? So without sounding like you are judging her. So if you notice that she is alone in her own place, just come in gently and just sit with her. Don't say anything for a while, maybe like 5-10 minutes, just sit with her. And then after a while, you can just ask a question. Simply just say, okay, what are you saying? So maybe she will be able to open up. You keep trying, eventually you will break through. So sometimes these things take time. Once they notice that they can trust you, and you will not judge them, they will open up, and then you'll be able to share. And then once they share, you note whatever it is that they have shared, and then you try it again and again. If the information is consistent, then you can be able to say, okay, this is what you have shared with me. You can share it with the expert that is treating her, and then they'll be able to. So, but I don't know if you have, if there's been a diagnosis in the center where she's going for treatment. What is the diagnosis? What are they treating her for?
They just
Because
put schizophrenia. Schizophrenia.
Pennsylvania. Okay, so
Done a lot of CT scan, this and this. Everything is perfectly correct. Okay.
okay,
They have done a lot
okay.
of
So what they are treating her is schizophrenia.
schizophrenia.
Okay, so that is one of the severe mental disorders. Schizophrenia is one of the it's a psychotic disorder. It affects the brain. It's one of the ones that like we have shared, that has symptoms of hallucinations and delusions, and in a distorted speech. So that is one of the most severe type of mental health disorders, because it also impairs the brain chemistry. So we do not know what may have triggered it. Some say that the cause may be related to altering of the brain chemistry, the brain function. Some research are still going on, but again, it is very important that we find out what is going on in her mind. So if she is lost in thoughts, after a while, just put your hand gently on her and then ask her what she's seeing in a very calming and loving manner. So she may not be able to share at first, but after several trials, she may be able to open up and say she's seeing this, she's seeing that. So if you observe that she is hallucinating, then you can then confirm that probably it's a case of maybe psychotic disorders. If not, then you'll probably be able to identify otherwise the case. So it is something that it may take a while, but eventually it can be overcome. So it is not impossible. So just keep praying with her and keep loving her and keep trying to reach through to her. Try different methods to reach through to her. So if you try this approach, is not working, try another approach. Just keep trying. Eventually you will break through, and then she'll be able to, once you get her to open up, that is the breakthrough. Once they are able to express what she's feeling or what she's going through, what is seen in her mind, you have won the battle, because the information you will extract from her will then be what you can then use to help her.
Okay.
So I hope I've been of help to you, ma.
Very well, very well.
All right, ma. So I understand how difficult it might be, and I sympathize with you, but do not lose heart. Don't give up on her yet. Just continue.
No. That one I will not even.
Yes, it's going to be well. It's going to be well, and so as we round off, um, we are White World Veritas Project, and what we do is guidance counseling, general guidance and counseling, educational guidance and counseling. We also render pastoral guidance and counseling, which are the three areas of my calling, and then educational consulting in areas of administrative support and policies and procedures to guide schools. So that is the things that we run in this organization, majorly on counseling, guidance and counseling. So everything guidance and counseling, individual guidance and counseling, group guidance and counseling, pastoral guidance, educational, career, those things are the areas that we look at. So this webinar is just one of the things that we do to support individuals, families, and schools to gain information and gain knowledge. And I hope that more people will be ready or will embrace guidance counseling in Nigeria. I know that one of the professions in Nigeria that does not necessarily have work to do, in quotes, are guidance counselors, because a lot of people do not value their service, not because they don't have work per se, but because our people are a superstitious people. We rather will spiritualize things than to, approach it and tackle it. We want to abandon all our responsibilities to God and, hide under prayers and say we are praying and God will help us and all of those statements that we make. But if we do the little things, I believe that we will be able to, solve majority of our problems. So we are open to, consulting at any level, speaking in schools. So we have been, like we've seen yesterday where I shared, I was in Edo State sometime in November 2020 to speak to some students, a group of SS1 and 2 students on career guidance. We've done it also in many other places where we share information about, how to help everyday living. And then every other thing, pastoral counseling, helping students to, learn proper behaviors, behavioral mental development, spiritual formations are things that we do in White World Veritas Project. So you can recommend us and also invite us anytime you feel you need somebody to speak on any topic of your choosing. We are available to travel. We are not shy. And if you want us to speak virtually, we are always open to sharing information. The whole essence is, like we have here, is that everyone can live and be and do better if they know better. And then we're on a mission to effect positive change in society with the whole truth. That is our dream. That's our goal. Positive change, positive change, positive change. And we hope that with all of this, we'll be able to, evolve a better society that we can live peacefully in the future. So I want to appreciate you all for taking this webinar. So our contact details are on the screen. You want to take them down, you can always reach out to us. So if you have any questions, we are available. Just send an email here or any other thing related to guidance and counseling, any other issues on mental health, you can always send an email, and then we'll be willing to share any information or answer any question whatsoever. Everything is just at the click of a button. We can always reach out to you. So, and then we're always available on social media. So you can reach us on our social media page. Just search for White Word Veritas Projects on Facebook and on Instagram. And we continue to share information on mental health and other topics that we believe will help schools, parents to individuals in life. So once again, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you for spending these 2 days with us, and we do not take it for granted. God bless you. Day. So I do not know if any other person has something to add or say before we end the meeting. It's already 3 o'clock, I believe. Amen. Thank you very much, ma. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, ma. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure hosting you today. And I hope that when we call you for another very important topic in the future, you will also oblige us. Bye and have a wonderful rest of the day.